Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll call the special meeting of the Waushara County Board of Supervisors to order. We'll start out with roll call.
Whitecap.
Mr. Eckstein is unable to join us this evening. Please remember him in your prayer tonight, if you would. So we'll stand then for a silent prayer and pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, then we'll move ahead to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Motion by Mr. Wadle. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bossard. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, very good. And we'll move into public comments. And we have 3 that have registered. John Van Amerongen. So you have 3 minutes, John.
I'll do my best.
Thanks.
So yes, I'm the Saxville Town Chairman, and I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes. Some years ago, when I took over, the board got together and realized that we had about 8 bridges 100 years old, a couple of them sanctioned by the state, and we didn't have enough money to fix them. We went forward. We went out to increase the levy, and we were able to do so. It was difficult, but it got done. The one thing that people wanted to know, like you, like them, like me, how much is it going to cost? And I was able to tell them it was going to cost $43 per 100,000 assessed value. So my question here is, what is this going to cost? The person that did most of the work on our bridges, there, Waushara County, did it on time, on budget, sometimes below. It is the heart of the county. This is a place where we are in a perfect place to spend funds on the highway department. It is a place where, according to this gentleman, who's the numbers guy, that our assessed value is going to go up. Is it? It's way up. And therefore our taxes are going to go down. Even with this, even if you pass this, and I highly encourage you, the taxes for these people out here and me and everybody in the room is going to go down. What better time could there be than right now to pass it? What better time so that the highway department can move into the future? I highly and strongly advise you to vote in favor. Thanks.
Thank you, John. All right, our second one is Tiffany Burmeister.
I may not be well liked tonight, but that's okay. I don't really think it matters what any of us have to say because I think everyone's minds are completely made up. But would it hurt to look at everything from a small business approach, from all the businesses that you have in Wautoma? Last week, you're talking about tourism. What tourism is there in Wautoma? A courthouse. Wow. We're rocking it there. So this increase is coming up and now the taxpayers are encouraged to, well, flip the bill for the difference. Yes, it's been said taxes are going to go down. When has that ever happened? Never. So I would highly expect our taxes are going to be reassessed. It's all going to go up. And if everyone's goes up, you're going to chase people out of the city because they can't afford it. It's somewhere around 19% of Waushara County that's at poverty level. So they can't pay it. You can't fund your building. They move out of Waushara County and lose their home. So where are we then? Trying to go through my notes here. Because it's already gone up. You say it's because of inflation. But what's going to happen again in another 3 months when you don't have the right bids and it's got to go back up again. I just don't think you guys are all kind of thinking for the people. I think it's a one-sided vote, but that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiffany. And last is Kathy Johnson.
So I spoke last week and came with an open mind, also concerned about taxes and inflation, which we have a bad inflation. I lived through the inflation in the 70s, so there's a lot of things people could do to help that, but they don't. That's just my personal opinion. But anyway, since last week, I learned a few things from Bart, who is the supervisor in the district I'm in. And one of the things I learned was that, and in thinking about this, I really have to admit that probably a lot of it is true. People just kind of sat on their hands and didn't do anything for a long, 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 long time. And now all of a sudden we have all these crises where we need all this money to build. Unfortunately, everything is increased in prices. I just had an assessment on my roof, given a ballpark figure with a however next year when we can do it, that kind of thing. But anyway, one thing that Bart and I did talk about was if we hired you, which we did through voting, then we need to have better communication on our part and on your part. Bart and I talked about a way we could get that done. I know everybody has a tax roll, and maybe we can get labels and something sent out so that the public in general is informed better. Because myself included, a lot of us don't take the Argus for whatever reason, and we don't pay attention to what's going on, which kind of isn't, that's on us, not you. But I did learn a lot, and I'm continuing to learn a lot, and you just have to go from there. And I would like a really simple way of explaining how our taxes.
Are you calling me simple?
Yeah. I've been called worse, don't feel bad. But anyway, just if you're gonna go through those numbers again, that it just be really explained where everybody understands it, because I think a lot of people don't really understand it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. Okay, then we'll move into new business, and the first item is the equalized value and bonding and its impact on the mill rate from Jeff Belangio from Huntington Securities. Jeff.
Thank you, everyone. Seems like we were just here. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Going up. Before I get into my 5-minute simplification, I do want to let you know that I did get a call yesterday morning from a gentleman in your county. I don't know the gentleman's name. That's not important. I can tell you he was very courteous. He had great questions. I was happy to be on the phone with him. He was sincerely interested in knowing. And he also asked me, like this nice young lady did, could you kind of be simple and kind of tell us what's going on here? Sometimes I try to give you a little too much information because I always think the more you know, the better we are. So again, through this whole process over the last 1.5 to 2 years, I've tried to give you from every angle how these things are figured, so that you have some confidence in what I'm telling you is accurate, and that what I am telling you, the market and we can deliver for the county. And I am here to tell you tonight that that's absolutely true, and it's absolutely going to happen, assuming you don't put it off for a couple of years. I've only got, my crystal ball's not really good a few years out, but in the near future here, I think we're going to be just fine. So the gentleman asked me, he said, Jeff, you know, let's just say I have a $200,000 property. I said, okay, sir, let me ask you a couple questions. You live on a lake? No. Have you put an addition on your house or taken out any building permits lately? No. Haven't done anything to my house in 10 years. I said, okay. You know what your valuation is? Yes. Do you know what your tax bill was Obviously, I was being rhetorical, and he was very kind and very nice, and he listened to me. I said, you obviously know what your tax bill was for county purposes last year. He said, yes, I do. I said, then I will tell you this, that based on everything that I've looked at, every calculation that I've made for this county in terms of its debt service and historical levies, and I've looked over the last 5 years, and by the way, when said we've never had a tax reduction, we did 2 years ago. The tax rate went down 34 cents per thousand. And I'm going to tell you that, sorry? Your tax rate over the last 5 years hasn't changed. It's gone from 684 to 687, and it's fluctuated somewhere 650. So you haven't seen big fluctuations in your tax, and those are the actual numbers. So I just want to make sure that we're using real data, and I'm not trying to be argumentative in any way. I just want the other people to know. So I said to the gentleman, if you know what your tax bill was and you haven't done any large improvements and you're not part of that new $500 million of equalized value that we have, your tax rate or your tax rate's going to go down and your tax bill is probably going to go down for county purposes. We, of course, live in a township or a city. We don't have control over that. This isn't affecting that overall tax rate. That's another school district. It's another portion of your taxes. But for county purposes, last year, we've seen you were at a 688. Previous year, you were at a 650. Everything I've done put into this building program, including an additional $27 million of new money on top of the 63 that we had, indicates to me that your tax rate per thousand will decrease next year. Thanks, Megan. We kept that one. There you can see. Okay, we had a 702 was our high in 2017. The next year it dropped to a 683, going the wrong way. 686 and 684, 684, 649, and a 688 last year. You go back to 2012, it was at a 629. That's 10 years ago. So you haven't fluctuated much, which is good. Counties normally don't. As I said, I've looked at your budgets the last 5 years. They don't fluctuate a lot. That's why I feel pretty comfortable, because I know what your debt service is going to be. I can put that on top of last year's levy. So I took last year's dollar levy, which was a little over 19 million. I added all the interest and debt service payments, and your tax rate's going to go down. I don't know what else I can tell you. The town chairman, I'll try to answer that one for you. Your $43.50, that's a snapshot in time. That changes. Our worst case scenario, you've got probably, if you did the full 90 million, you probably got in that component about $1.24. Most of it's already in there. And now I don't want to, that does not mean your tax rate's going up. That's only the component cost of the debt service. Okay? And I think most everybody understands that. Happy to answer any questions that you have. I don't know how to tell, by the way, I don't know the gentleman's name, but if he's in the audience, I certainly want to thank him for his questions and for being very civil, very open, and I actually enjoyed talking with the man.
I have a question for you, Jeff. Now, you've given us these numbers, and I think I've seen a percentage of the equalized values from 2017, and it was like a 2%, 2%. It was a 5, 6 that the equalized values have increased. And this year, we're projecting that it's going to be a 17 point something percent increase in equalized value, which is a good thing for what we're doing. My question to you is, in your experience, I looked today and I couldn't find it online, but has Wisconsin ever gone in a negative percentage on equalized value?
To the best of my knowledge, John, the state of Wisconsin has not.
Okay.
I've had a few small villages, less than 100 million in valuation, that after 2008, when the real estate market went to heck in a handbasket.
Mhm.
2009, they were almost nothing. I do know one community in northeastern Wisconsin, small little city, went down 1%, but obviously has taken that back.
Mhm.
I don't believe you as a county, at least in the last 11 years that I've worked with you,
Mhm.
you have not had any negative in terms of that value.
Sure.
In terms of estimating the 17%, that's really Department of Revenue in the state of Wisconsin. They're pretty accurate. I mean, this is going to get certified before you finish your budget, and that valuation will be used as your denominator against obviously your 20 million. It's going to be that. They're not, very seldom, if ever, have I seen where the final is not what the preliminary came to be. Okay.
And you've figured these on a minimal increase of 2%.
Yeah, let's talk about that, John, because if there's some concern that sometime in the future that my numbers are going to, the young lady behind me is going to say, I want to know that guy's phone number. I'm calling him up because my taxes went up a bunch. That's not going to happen. Okay. We used a 2% growth factor in figuring my debt service. Why? Because I don't think these people ought to pay any more than their fair share of facilities that are going to last 50 years plus, yet the state statute's only going to allow us 25 years to pay them back. That being said, 2% in terms of an inflationary thing, as we know now, is nothing. So people, the last 10, 15 years of this debt service payment should be paying a proportionate share of the equity in these buildings. And that's why I structured it the way I did. Next year, when we're at this point and your valuation's gone up 4, 5, 6%, my numbers are, it's laughable because you're already past the worst of my projections. Pretty confident that that's going to be the reality. And that's why I only use a 2% growth factor. No one envisioned 17% here. But we were hoping for 4. And when I ran my original numbers that got out into the public and that we used as a guesstimate, they're a little higher than they are now because we didn't realize we were going to have all of that value. When it's great because now you get 500 million that not only is that value helping to support any of this building program, it's helping to support your $6.50 or whatever it's going to be next year. Does that make sense to everyone?
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Bart.
I've got a question, Jeff. So you've got the chart, go back to the last chart that you had up there. So you had a chart for the last 10 years of levy, predicted what future is going to be for expansion. Do you have that broken down in the levy number? Did I ever see that? Did you ever have that?
No, you didn't,
So
Bart.
you didn't really predict what the levies are going to be along with like a 2%?
No. What I did is I took your actual historical, and I also have your dollar levies. So I took the dollar levy from last year from that 688. It was a little over 19. Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was $19,636,080. Sorry, $19,636,846 was your levy last year. That was produced by the 688. To that number, I don't know what your budget's going to be this year, but I added to that number an estimate based on the previous 5 years of what you guys normally raise. And then I added what I see as the future debt service for 27 million more dollars. And your tax rate's going down. I'm not, no, because they're going to hold me to that. And then that you have to do your budget yet. So I'll know exactly what that's going to be when you do your budget.
So your prediction is it will go down.
It will
You just
go
don't
down.
have the number.
It'll go down.
Okay.
Bart, I have a pretty good idea as to what it's going to be. So it'll go down.
Can you advance that one slide, Megan? There's like a 25-year projection. Yeah.
Excuse me a minute. Can I ask you to please keep it down out there so we can hear what's going to listen to Jeff here now. So
I think it's at the very end of this page. Yeah. Right, so that's a projection over a period of time,
At
right?
2%, yes, sir.
Okay,
Again, it's a snapshot in time, Jesse, and your rate, that's only 2%. That could end up being 50 cents, 40 cents, way out there. Because let's say you had another, between now and that time, let's say you had another 15% increase in your valuation. Then we're not even close to those numbers as a component of whatever that annual levy is.
okay.
Now, what we can also do, depending on how the county board feels, if you're going to go ahead with this, and again, tonight, you're not borrowing any money, but once you decide how much is going to be the total, we can alter these numbers based on even next year's equalized value. So we'll have one more shot before we do the long-term debt. And I think you're going to see they're going to be even less than what I've projected there. Again, what you're looking at way to the right is just the component of an annual tax levy for debt service. Everyone understands that, right?
Mhm.
It's not an increase.
So right now, so the last time you spoke to us, you said that the time is right because stocks have shifted into bonds. That you were talking about how we're bonded and everything's getting dumped into bonds right now. So what happens if that goes the other way? Does that affect this sheet then?
Jesse, once our debt service is in place, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the economy does. You're locked into those rates once we do the financing. We're locked into right now 47 million of the 63.
Okay.
So it won't matter. But what matters is between now and the time we put the balance of whatever you guys decide you want to borrow into place. Once that's done, then it's a moot point. Doesn't matter. As long as our valuation increases by more than 2%, those will be the worst numbers on an annualized basis that you'll see. It's not cumulative. That's an annual look at what your tax levy would be for debt service. And if it's $6.61 or whatever it is, $1 something in that particular year is attributable to our building program. Does that make sense to everyone? It's just a component. I mean, you have expenses at home. I'll try to put into that. You know, we got a car payment, maybe a house payment, and you go buy groceries. Your house payment's pretty much locked in for 30 years. The other things can fluctuate based on how you behave and what you decide to do and how quickly you want to buy a new car or how much food and if you want to go to the restaurants, that kind of thing. So, you know, once we're in place, we're locked in. Get good sailing. That's why, you know, I'm not saying I'm nervous, but I'd certainly like to be able to stand here and tell Bart, I can tell you exactly what your tax rate's going to be. But at this particular point, you know, we still have some interest rate exposure on whatever balance. We have 16 million left on the 63 and probably some additional to complete the projects, whatever the county board decides in the future as you go through this. So.
Okay, is there any other questions then for Jeff?
Sorry, Bart, I wish I could be more, but you understand.
Now's your chance to ask him if he's here. So,
But just to clear one other thing. So you said once our budgets would be approved and in, you would be able to solidify.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And that's going to happen, Jesse, and you'll have to have your budget done and figured by the end of October. When do we certify? Third Monday of November? Second Monday in November, you'll have to have it completed because that's when it gets certified. So then I'll be able to tell you right to the penny.
Okay.
Well, pretty close, a lot closer to the penny because we still have to go into the market and lock in some interest rates. But yeah, we'll be really close.
Okay.
But it's going down. Compared to last year, it's going down.
Thanks.
all right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate
Appreciate it. Okay, and then we'll move into letter B, discussion possible action on the following resolution. Resolution number 37-08-22, initial resolution authorizing not to exceed 26,500,000 general obligation bonds or promissory notes for the county building project. Is there a motion? By Mr. Bonfiglio. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. All right, is there a discussion?
So as Pat brought up before, so what moved us into today was we need a major majority vote on pushing this through to increase what we're allowed to borrow. So this isn't moving anything forward. This isn't committing to anything. This is just saying, all right, we can borrow more. Once it moves to that point though, if we're very close to a major majority in the last meeting, we're voting, just as Pat said before, we're voting on awarding bids for the highway shop immediately following this. So if we approve this, is essentially saying we're moving forward with building the highway shop as it's been bid.
Mhm.
And so for me personally, that's the reason I take issue with this. It's not that the time isn't right, or, you know, from number projections, the tax going down. It's all the unknowns we've never seen where we've got 20 to 30% inflation going into something like this before, and how that's going to affect everybody and how it's going to affect us as a county. In operationally, we're always comparing county to county with things like wages and where we can hire people at. And so when I'm discussing this with people, a lot of people are looking at it that it's just, is this going to raise my taxes or is it going to lower my taxes? But what I've been hearing is past that, is it responsible for us to do this right now, given the uncertainty? We haven't been in a time like this before. There's a lot of uncertainty for anybody that lives in the county, anyone that lives anywhere in this country. So for us, is it the responsible thing to do given the unknowns that we can't control? So yes, it looks right for us right now, but are we going to be kicking ourselves just for the position that we put everybody in for things outside of our control? And this just compounds it. Because the highway shop, we do have other options other than completely replacing it. So that's where it gets difficult with this, because we approve this, it's almost certain that it's going to go through as proposed. And I think there's other options that we haven't explored thoroughly yet. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Yeah, and you're correct in that this takes 3/4 of the elected officials to pass. The other would take a simple majority. So that's what you're saying. Does anybody want to speak to that? Either Kurt or Ruth, anybody want to speak to that at all, or any projections on? Yeah, Jeff?
Just Jesse made some great points. And there was something I thought of when one of the first lady spoke. The operational levy is different than your general fund levy, I think, as you know, Jesse. And when you look at that, a lot of it's funded out of your sales tax revenues. So some people are coming here because your sales tax revenues are about $1.9 million. And that's a real significant source of, obviously, dollars for that operational and other things. So I just wanted people to keep that in mind with respect to the uncertainty. That, and Jesse, I was around back in the 81, 82, and 83 when we had treasury bills that were yielding 15% and mortgage rates, 30-year mortgage rates were 18%. And I remember hearing a lot of people say, oh my God, it's never going to, get any better, but it was very short-lived, and thank God it did. And I don't think we're in this particular predicament for a long time either. It won't be ongoing for much more period of time, a year and a half probably. But again, no crystal ball. So I wouldn't get too worried about it. Although every time my wife goes to the grocery store, I kind of shake my head and say a few things that I probably shouldn't say. But in any case, I know what you're saying. I
Right.
understand.
But you can't have it both ways, because if that's the case, which I hope it is, then, and we see the 20-30% inflation that's driving up the costs of this project, then those costs should come down.
Well, we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know things go up a lot quicker than they come down. So, again, I don't have a crystal ball on costs. I think Kurt covered that. I think you do. You have bids that you're allowed to consider, I believe. So you have a price locked in for that. And again, if I can, this resolution is going to allow you a lot of flexibility in the future to move at a quicker pace. So if in fact you decide to move ahead, you already have this resolution in place. I can get you into the market really quickly once that 3/4 vote has been in place. Otherwise, we're going to have to go through this process again, delayed another month. And in no way am I trying to put fear into anybody. That's not why I'm here. I just want to try to explain, because I've heard questions from you in the past about, well, what if, how do we react to it? As I said, Jesse, I'll say it again. I'm a bird in the hand kind of guy. I'd like to have some more of those interest rates locked in for all of us. So, because to me, that's really where the cost is going to lie. It's not going to be so much in terms of the dollar cost for an additional 2x4 or whatever is meaningful. But in the long run, over a 25-year period, 50 basis points in interest rate is going to be a hell of a lot more than the additional cost in your actual construction. So, and that gets compounded because in order to meet those projections and not to tax these people, like we said we weren't going to, we need to push that down the road a ways. So all of that goes into my consideration when I'm trying to develop for you the most economic, cost-effective plan. For me, savings is avoiding payments. Different than my lovely wife who comes back and says, geez, look what I bought at the store. I saved 12% and I put my hand out, but she doesn't hand me the 12%. For me, that's not a savings. For me here, when I say savings, it's avoiding interest in the future and costs on my money. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bossard.
Just a question for Jeff. So would you be anticipating that interest rates on our borrowing is going to go up significantly in the future?
Well, that's a wonderful question. We're in the inverted yield curve. I think I tried to explain that before. The short-term rates are higher than the long-term rates. We have our short-term money in place. It's at less than 2%. It's our long-term money I'm talking about now. The bonds going out from year 10 through the next 15 years. So 25, 10 through 25. These movements that we've seen with respect to the feds and the discount rate, are they startling? A little bit, but I showed you that graph of the bond buyer 20. Actually, when they bumped them 75 basis points on the short end, the 20-year rates on average came down, which was encouraging to me. So am I anticipating rates going to go up? Over the next year, they'll gradually move up. I don't think there's any question in that. The short term went up again, and the market's considering that the feds are going to bump another 75 basis points on the discount rate because they just want to make that money supply harder for us to get. It's going to be more expensive lending those monies, and the banks gear those certainly off their Fed funds rates. They don't have enough deposits from you and I to do the kind of business they want to do with respect to mortgages, et cetera. So they have to borrow from the Federal Reserve System. And that's the rate the Federal Reserve System is going to charge them. That's how they're controlling the supply of the money. Does it make sense to everyone? So it's harder to get because we don't want to pay. I don't want to go to 83. A friend locked into a mortgage for 18%. Thank God those came down and he got to refinance them. But it took a little bit of time. So I'm not trying to skirt your question. I do think rates are going to go up from where they are right now. Certainly in the near term, in the next 15 months. I think November could be somewhat of a little bellwether, depending on how that election goes, and whether or not we get some semblance of some fiscal control. Because when you look at the last year, how many trillions of dollars have we printed and spent? That's why we've got 18, 20% inflation. I don't care what political side of the spectrum you're on, that's a fact.
When would be, when would be the projected time that we would be borrowing this money? Do you, either of you know what, what that timetable would be?
Yeah, so we would need to provide an updated cash flow projection for Jeff. But obviously out of the gate, you don't need all of that money from the highway shop. So we're anticipating, an 18 to 20 month construction time period.
Mhm.
So if you look at that, it wouldn't be immediate.
Mhm.
I think the thing that Jeff's talking about would be a strategy of how do you borrow that to be able to capture those interest rates and not pay a lot of interest. So to answer your question, I don't have the exact time of when it would borrow, but it would not be anytime soon. It would be something after we get the progress started down the road.
Okay. Dave?
Hey, Kurt, as long as you are up there. So we've talked about the interest rates and the potential for them to rise. And right now, I think it's important that we realize that this is a bird in the hand situation with the bids that we have on the highway shop. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So we've got hard bids for $27 million. We've got the $51 million for the government center. We've got the $2.75 million for Poisippi EMS. All of those are fixed numbers. That is a huge percentage of the overall project that would be tied into fixed budget numbers that aren't subject to fluctuation or increases, such as a question was posed during the comment period.
That's accurate. The only thing that we have not secured a bid on in the highway shop is the concrete and the landscaping. Those would need to be rebid. We do have a placeholder in there so that that number is there. But just to clarify, those are the two areas that we did not get a number completed there. So we would rebid that, but we anticipate that it's within the numbers that we have on that sheet.
All right.
But the rest of what you stated, other than the numbers were off a little bit, is accurate.
All right. Thank you.
I got something for you.
Yeah.
So if we put off not accepting the highway thing and rebid it next year and 5 years, what are we looking at for potential increases?
So historically, construction has jumped 6 to 8% each year. And I think it's already been talked about. We saw a huge jump this last year, and that's why we're here. Quite frankly, that's why we're talking about this here. I don't anticipate that we have another 30% jump, but to Jeff's conversation about forecasting the future, I don't know that. But I can tell you that historically, other than like I shared with you at the last meeting in 2009 and 2010, there was a drop anywhere between 5 to 8% after that dip of what happened in 2008. Construction prices have always increased. So I know it is attractive to say, let's not accept those bids and rebid it in spring. I am not confident to tell you that your numbers would go down. I actually think they would go up. I'm confident that if you bid it today, they would go up. If we just said we're not going to do it and we bid it today, we put it on the street and we bid it 30 days from now, they would be higher than what you have right now. Whether that holds through in the spring, all I can see is that they continue to climb. So.
What, so Kurt, what, do you have an idea of what it would take if we, well, I called you earlier today and asked you about what would it take if we were to renovate the existing highway shop, like addressing some of the major concerns of why we're expanding it, and then, keeping it in the location that it is, building an additional storage building. Do you have an idea of what that figure would be?
I do. Am I out of order in talking about that outside of this agenda item? Because it's, and I'm not saying I don't want to answer a question. I do.
Sure.
I just don't want to be out of order because I'm talking about something that isn't related to the.
Well, I think this is relevant because we talked about
Okay.
whether or not this would
Yep.
move on to that.
Yeah,
So I think that's probably what Jesse's.
Gotcha.
What we had talked about before is if we had a figure in mind, so say you come and you say, we could do this renovation for 10 million, just to throw it out there for argument's sake. If a number of us were like 27 million, we don't want to approve that, but we would approve, raising it by 10. That's the only reason I think it'd be appropriate for you to talk about it now, because
Sure.
after the fact, if we vote it down, we can't talk about that.
Yep.
So,
So Jesse called me today and just had asked some questions about if there was other scope considered at the highway shop. And my understanding of what we talked about was if we didn't do anything with the office and we would bring the repair shop and I'm going to call it the garage portion to store the equipment and attach it to the existing highway shop. What are those numbers? And we talked at what, 130?
Yeah.
So these are really rough numbers, right? So don't hold me to this. This is square footage numbers based on hard bid numbers. So I had my team back out the space of the office, and this is it's not the best way to do it, but it was the only way we could do it with the time frame. If we pulled the office portion of the highway shop off, we've estimated that that's about $4 million of the base bid of the $22 million. So that gets us down to $18 million for what we're talking about without the additional alternate. Okay. So then you have to add that alternate, which we have a hard number on that of $4 million. If we add that additional bay, it's $4.5 million. So you're in that neighborhood of that 22 to $22.5 million. Now, we would still have to add a conference room to that. And we did square footage on that conference room based on where that conference room would go and how the addition would be configured in there. That would be somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 in regards to adding it onto that 22. So the reality is, out of that 27 million, if we just carved that office portion off of it and attached it to there, it's probably in that 22 to $22.5 million rather than the 27. And that's carrying some contingency in there. That's if we went with a CMU or a precast building like we have right now. We did talk about if we went to steel. So we did a calculation based on if it was a steel building, and there would be a savings of about $2 million if we went to steel. And that would be a prefabbed steel building. And that was a discussion point when we first started the design of the highway shop, because we wanted it to be a 50-year building because we were worried about corrosion and everything that you had with the salt that's there. So it would be heading in the opposite direction. So it wouldn't be apples for apples. But that would get you down into that $20 million number rather than 27. That's rough. So
yeah, I guess my question was more so not replacing all of the work stalls and everything,
Okay.
like taking, so what's existing there, addressing the major issues, like putting gutters on that building would be a great idea.
Mhm.
And so like things that are that are more within our means to renovate the building, bring it up to where we can get an additional 30 years out of the building.
Yeah.
And then adding so if we were to add the additional storage building, you're saying that would be $4 million.
that's the alternate. When we see the alternate that's on there that we have that alternate number for, that's for the additional parking. That's about a $4 million number.
Is it possible to pull that up? Megan, do you have that picture?
The drawing that we had for the highway shop.
With the
today.
different,
Nope. It would have been at the end of the highway bids. We did that. Here we go.
there it is.
There you go.
So not the yellow area, but the tan area that you can't see there. That's the portion up there that's $4 million, that alternate right there.
Okay.
So this is real crude estimating, right? But it's the only way we can do it in a few hours. Here's what I would tell you is that if you would go about doing that and adding on to it, and let's say that the number is somewhere between 15 and 20 million, because I don't think you're going to solve the problems out there for less than that number, right? And that's really what was at the master plan discussion, is that do we invest those kind of dollars in a building that's vintage 1974 and expect the balance of that to last another 50 years? So we're talking about a 100-year-old highway building. And I think that's what you need to weigh. And that's why I haven't been trying to be difficult. It's a matter of saving that $10 million over the life of the borrowing. Does that make sense?
Well,
So-
so you keep saying that it'd take $14 million to
So there's
dress up the existing building that they're using today.
Yeah,
and
so-
it's functioning the way they need it to today with all the work we have today.
So we would need to determine dress up, right? So if dress up means that you just want to take care of maintenance items that are on the building, that's different than getting it so that it is completed so that we're expecting it to last another 20 to 30 years, right? You could go out there and do some maintenance on that building and say, hey, we're going to wait in 10 years, we're going to replace that. And that was my recommendation last time. Don't stick any money into that structure right now because it doesn't have a 30 to 40-year lifespan and where it's at. Anybody that goes out there and looks at that right now, I think would agree with that. But if there's an element that you want to do repairs on there, then we would have to identify what that is. And if it's building just a garage to bring things in so it's out of the elements, that could be something that you evaluate in regards to what that solution, and then the highway continues to function as it is with that being a long-term solution. I come back to the fact, and that's why, very candidly, I told the group this when we did the master plan, the highway shop was one that I did not anticipate that people were going to approve. I didn't. The priority was government, a government center in Poisippi, and then the other ones, the Watoma EMS was a real close third in there, right? And highway shop was at the end. What put it over the edge was that we were going to be able to borrow $63 million, and for less than 50 cents per $100,000 for a taxpayer, they were going to get all of the problems done. Everybody's, that's a great idea. This happened. Inflation jumps up, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this is a stupid idea, right? This is a really dumb idea. Who signed up for that? I was there leading the pack. Sign me up. I did it, right? Jeff comes in and he says, you have an equalized evaluation that went up, and now you're going to get all of this and the taxes are going to go down. That's a different message than what we were. It's a better message than we had when we signed up for that. That's what I'm struggling with this. And I'm not trying to be difficult. And I know I'm crossing lines here in regards to where you're talking about, but in the best interest of the taxpayers to say, we want to save $10 million. And then 5 years from now, you're still having issues at the highway shop. They're going to look at you when you come back and say, we want to replace it. And the number from 27 is going to be 37 or 40 million, because that's what happens in construction. That's what I'm trying to explain in regards to, it's not wise to stick money in that highway shop. If you don't want to do anything on the highway shop or limited, just do it on a maintenance element with a plan that you do it somewhere in the future.
So in your opinion, we go ahead and build the new highway shop. That building needs to be demolished. It's
No,
just-
I never said that. And if I'm representing that, that's not accurate. It's that that's not a solution. If you're looking at creating a solution for what the highway needs for the future, that's not where you start. We've even talked about that could house or be some cold storage for some elements there with the highway shop, with the intent that it's going to serve that purpose until, don't stick any more money into it. Let it serve its purpose. As long as it's keeping rain and wind out, and there's spots where it doesn't do that, don't stick money in it. Let it be its thing. And then as it continues to take care of it, there will be a day where you say, take it down. That's not tomorrow when you move out of it. It's not. But it's also not one of those structures that you invest in for a 20 or 30-year solution. So if I'm misrepresenting that, I apologize. That's not my intent, that take it down.
Okay. And so has there been any discussion in building grounds of what would move into that building? Because I mean, we pretty much got everything up for moving around, building new. So what?
So I'll tell you about building and grounds. Building and grounds, we have not started the design on that building and grounds building, but there's elements that are in that building and grounds that needs to be undercover. And that was an option that we kicked around, was using the old highway shop, but nothing definitive has been put in place for that.
Department of Aging has vehicles that sit outside right now and has no home. There's no plan in the future for anything because of the budgets. So there's talk that possibly they could park them inside there, which will help extend the life of those vehicles. So, like he said, till the building becomes unusable, or we decide to stick money into it or level it. And then we have to come up with a solution to that. But we took over all those vehicles from Share Industries that now just sit out in open weather. In the wintertime, they got to go out and pick people up and they're covered in snow. And this would be a temporary solution and could be a long-term solution. But I guess in my mind, it's to stick money in that old building makes absolutely no sense. Because we're not going to get our money out of it, and it's someplace you're going to have to address it. And it's not going to be a long-term solution. The building is 50 years old or whatever.
1974 is when it was built, yeah.
And Brian, did you get a grant? Are you getting a grant for this brine thing that would be affected if we didn't do this? We would have no place to put it, or we'd have to invest money in something to put it
Well, the
someplace?
salt brine maker, the state DOT is wanting us to go to salt brine because it reduces the cost. It reduces the amount of salt that's going out on the road, environmentally safe. It's a $200,000 grant that they're willing to pay for the material to make the brine maker itself. Right now, we need a minimum of a 6-inch, 4-inch water line coming in order to supplement that. We have an 1.5 inches. It does not work. It will not work. So we'll be out on that.
And that's addressed in the infrastructure with the road, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, because there's also fire protection that's required. The other thing is for, when we talked, Jesse, about what would go back in that building, you said last meeting, maybe that's not good enough. If it's not good enough for highway, maybe it shouldn't be good enough for somebody else. I think you misconstrued what I said, because what I said was we were just looking at different avenues, because it hasn't been talked about at highway or at public works. It hasn't been talked about at buildings and grounds, but there's still room. There's still stuff that we would put in there. So, our plows and our wings, them are all sitting outside right now at this time. I believe I told you that cold storage shed that we have now, the existing one, when we put our summer equipment in there, guy my size can't walk through there. They have it packed that tight. So that building would still be used by us until a point in time when we can't use it anymore.
That was the 3-sided building you said gets packed with the summer
Well,
equipment?
there's another building over by the salt sheds that I pointed out when we walked out past the recycling area.
Yeah,
That building over that way.
okay.
That other building, the 3-sided building, is full of trucks. If you go back there, if they're done paving already, you go back there tonight, it'll be full.
Right.
There's 12 trucks that park in there. There's rubber that's stored in there. That's the other thing, rubber and paint. I mean, in a 3-sided building, the wind and the rain is still hitting it, and it settles in on the rubber, and it disintegrates the boxes, and they fall apart when the guys are trying to work with them and stuff. We'd put that stuff inside underneath the roof of the existing.
Okay, I believe all of our questions have been answered. Does anybody have any other questions now before we proceed to vote on this? Now's the time.
Can I?
Yep, Pat, go ahead.
Just a comment.
Mhm.
The people that were against it, and I was initially against this, I was going to vote against this at the last meeting. But after listening to Jeff describe what's going to happen to our taxes, that was the major thing that I heard from my constituents. I don't want my taxes to go up. He's saying our taxes aren't going to go up. So what is our argument? We have a perfect opportunity to build a new building for the highway shop, and let's take advantage of that. Why are we, that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, I don't see why we're passing up this opportunity. I think it would be a mistake to do so. And it wouldn't be good for our taxpayers. They expect us to do something that is good for the community. And this is. It's not going to cost them anything more because of the equalized value increase. So I think it's foolhardy to not go with this. Sorry.
It's okay. Is there any other comments?
Yeah, I just got one.
Mhm.
And back to Brian, I think this new development also expands for your future needs too, right? Which you don't have correctly today.
We don't have enough room for what we've gained in the past 6 years.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
with the alternates that are included.
And that's because you've taken on the townships?
Yeah, we've added 12 men and 12 routes on 8. We've added 360 miles of road. And just for reference, there's 334 miles of county roads that we maintain now. So we've almost doubled what we do for maintenance on.
Okay. Everybody have their questions answered? All right. Unless I'm not saying anymore, let's proceed to vote on resolution number 37-08-22.
This is not- All I got is a circle going around here. Maybe
Mm-mm. Okay, there's 9, is that right? 9 in favor and 1 against, so the resolution passes. All right, very good. Then we can move on to item number 7, the unfinished business. A, discussion possible action on the motion action item I, bids and recommendations of award for highway shop. Is there a motion? Motion by Mr. Piaski. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kirschner. All right. Is there a discussion?
I think if we don't pass this tonight, is it tonight? Basically, if we don't do it now, the bids are not firm, correct?
Yeah, the bids expire on the 26th.
Yes. So that-
Which bids exactly?
So everyone that is on that list, this packet that we have here, obviously we would need to rebid the concrete footings and foundations, and we would have to rebid the landscaping. The balance of all of those bids, we had a 45-day window from when the bid date was, and I believe it was the 12th of July. And they expire 45 days from then. And what that means is that they're not bound to hold those numbers. So the ones that we have identified on the right-hand side, and I should have confirmed, these are all based on if you do all of the alternates. So those are the ones that are the proposed lows. You'll see that there are several areas where we did only get one bid. There are some areas where we had multiple bids. We actually extended the bid date on this because at one point we were going to have several that didn't have any. And we went out and begged and pleaded for people to put numbers in some of these areas. So the concrete number, like I alluded to, we did get a number from a contractor. It was submitted not in accordance. It was emailed. It wasn't submitted to the county. So that's the number that is in there. We would need to rebid that work to be able to firm that up. And then the landscaping is the same way. Landscaping is one of those elements that you don't need right away because obviously we're not doing it right away, but concrete we do need right away. So we would need to send that out for a rebid right away.
And Kurt, we had talked too about that if this was accepted, you were going to go back to these people and ask
Yeah.
them to.
There's value engineering, and that's
Value
one of those things that we can do value engineering with the low contractors, and we would do that if you give us direction tonight to move forward with these individuals. And then the final contract amount that we would bring back to you, I would anticipate we'd bring that back to Building and Grounds after we get the VE done, but we could start that process. We could give them a letter of intent before the 26th expires with the intention that we will bring back some value engineering items to run past Brian and his staff to make sure that we're not compromising the intent of the building, and then bring it back to Building and Grounds for approval. And again, I'm picturing a couple $100,000. It's not millions, but I think there's some money to be had there.
Okay. Yeah, and I noticed I think I counted there's 9 that just received one bid.
Yep.
I mean,
And that's kind of the market where we're at right now. You know, so you have some contractors that have told us they were going to bid, like the concrete. My project manager that was on it, he had 3 individuals that said they were going to bid. We got 1 and it wasn't submitted right. So that's kind of the element of where we're at. But I will tell you that when we looked at where the budget elements we were anticipating in the market, these are in line with what we were anticipating with
guess
the
that was-
increase in the markets that were there.
okay. That's, I guess, what I was going to
Yep.
ask if we were in line. So,
Yep.
Is there any other questions?
If we were, if we were looking at waiting and rebidding this for a spring build, when would the bidding begin on that?
So if I was to bid for a spring build, I'd like to get it out on the street sometime in February. So it's a bid in March. That's when the contractors are looking to plan for their work in spring. So it would be in that winter period time, kind of first quarter. So that's when they would bid it with a spring start. And that's one of the elements to weigh here is that what's the offset in regards to winter conditions? Because there is some cost that's in there to start the work in the winter, temporary heat, all those elements that are in there. The percentage of what that would be to potentially offset of rebidding it is nominal. You're locked into those numbers to what David said, those numbers are locked in at this point.
Would it be wise to not lock in portions of this? I don't know. Is that what you were just saying? Or because
No, the only thing that I would lock in all of these other than the VE. So when we go back to the contractors, if you guys would approve it now and say, hey, we want you to guys find value engineering, we would reach out with a letter of intent, and a letter of intent would say to the contractor, it's the intent that we're going to enter into an agreement with you, but we need you to evaluate some savings items and value engineering, provide us a list of value engineering items. So now we've engaged them to say, hey, you need to honor your number, but there are some terms that you need to honor the number. They come back with some elements that they would say we can change this or this, light fixtures, whatever the number is or whatever the item is. We then get the owner involved, and that would be Brian and his team, building and grounds, as well as the engineering team, because we don't want to compromise the integrity of the building by just saving a few bucks. And then once we finalize what that VE item would be, we would reduce their bid amount by that VE item, and that's what we would lock in. So your tabulation would go down based on those savings, as well as the contract amount with that low bidder.
when's the anticipated completion date on this if we pulled the trigger?
So we've got, like I said, we got about an 18 to 20 month duration. We would anticipate starting as soon as we get all of that VE done, and get our permits in place. So I still would like to start yet this fall, get started. So year and a half from now, what does that put us at? Middle of 24, something like that, middle to fall of 24.
Okay.
And I'm sorry too, I should have asked you, Mark, when Piaski, when you made this motion, there are three levels. Is your motion to accept all three of the bids?
Yes,
Okay.
with the
Alternates included.
with all alternates included.
Okay, and Mark Kirschner is your second. Okay, just so everybody understands, it's not a portion of it, it's the entire project. Okay, is there any other comments or questions? Art?
I've just got one question. So we lowered the amount of borrowing down a little bit. So we feel we've got enough borrowing now to complete all these projects.
Well, if you look at my spreadsheet, I had given us $500,000 cushion because it was at that 89.5. The cushion's gone.
Okay.
So we're going to have to look at that Bob, you're shaking your head. I want to explain my cushion is that I have a contingency in each one of those line items. So we still have a contingency. It's just that if you added up all of these contract amounts, it gets to the 89.5. And when we talked about a 27, it would have been 90 million. So it was 500,000 more than what we needed to do a project with contingency. I just want to clarify that. So we will stress that we are going to continue to look for every penny that we can through this VE, as well as when we do the EOC and when we do the elements of all of those components that are in there. So
One thing we have not talked about is your investment earnings. We got 30 million sitting at Associated, still at Associated. I got a pretty good idea that you're gonna make close to $1 million in investment earnings. I didn't want to spring that on you yet, but that's gonna be used towards your project. So Bart, to answer your question, when it dropped to 26.5, I wasn't quite as worried as Kurt because I didn't tell Kurt about that anyway. So I didn't want you to spend it before we had it. And if you didn't spend it on the construction of brick and mortar, we'd spend it on debt service payments. So,
Sure.
But money's gonna be there.
All right.
Okay, is there any other questions then? And everybody understands what we're voting on now? Okay. Let's proceed to vote. And this needs a simple majority. Is that correct, Megan? Yep, okay. Okay, so the resolution passes. All right, very good. All right, so our next item is board suggestions for future agenda items. Is there anything? Okay. Anything else? All right, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Bonfiglio, second by Mr. Wadle. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you guys too for your expertise. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Mr. Quayle. Didn't go down.
Hey,
Well,
that was
it's-
pushed by me because I dropped
I
mine.
got it weighed against.
You have a fumbling chair. That's how you can.
Half a battery.
Hey, Brandon, I'm going to send you some
Charged
stuff
up.
from economic
I
development.
thought a brand new one.
And
For me,
it's
because I
stuff
wasn't
just
part
to
of the
look at,
initial-
but we're gonna have to start making some
Oh,
decisions
wow.
on it.
I don't think
So
that the
then
first
just look it over and we'll
project
talk
could've
maybe
went
before the next exact.
So now with that moving
It'd be
forward,
nice
We'll get
if you
together.
could have gave us a number.
hearing from these guys, you put 10 million into
Extra
it.
lumber.
And it doesn't give them exactly what they need, and we're coming back after it in the future. I
Good. No, no,
agree
it's
that
good. It's
time to
just the stuff
strike
that Bob
now,
Welch,
and we can
brought forward.
we can
And we'll
start
just see if
playing the
we think
market a
that's
little bit here.
That's great.
Well, as soon as he said that,
kind of
well, as
identify
soon as he
where
said that,
we
you
can
can
go.
get-
It's a pretty good plan, but you know, it's good to have.
More money in taxes.
Huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
This is mine. Yep.
Full of the people that.
I just gave that to Megan.
17.
Right now.